Ryan is the CEO and founder of Genlogs. Ryan, tell us a little bit about what Genlogs is.
Yeah, sure thing. Genlogs, we call ourselves a freight intelligence platform, and at the core, we have deployed a nationwide network of roadside sensors that are collecting on all truck traffic on the roads. So we're getting trends, patterns, and an understanding of which carriers are on which lanes, and then servicing what shippers. And we provide that primarily for freight brokers to get an understanding of when they are trying to do either shipper sales or carrier sales, who they should reach out to.
So the business that you've built, or in the process of building, your early stage, is really based on your experience. You worked for the CIA?
I did.
What can we talk about?
Yeah, the subtitle on Genlogs is Freight Intelligence, and I do not have a freight background. I would say no one's really born into freight, except for like maybe you in your background.
More people born into freight than you.
No, I know, but I certainly do not have a background. I'm deeply humbled by those that do. My background was on the intelligence side, where I spent years in the CIA. My job was to recruit. I was a counterterrorism officer, so I have an Arabic-speaking background, and my job was to recruit sources inside of Al-Qaeda and other terrorist networks, and then validate the information they were giving us against other sensors and satellites and other sources of data to make sure that they were telling us the truth, and then ultimately use that data to disrupt terrorist attacks. I didn't want the next 9/11 to happen on my watch, and that's the background that I have and some of my co-founders have as well.
The sort of core focus of Genlogs is the idea that you've got this visual technology camera technology that you're using, optical, if you will. It strikes me to solve the problem. There are 900,000 potential lane pairs in the United States. How possibly can you create a ubiquitous camera network to actually solve all that?
Yeah, sure. I would say one thing we are not is a tracking company, in the sense of, if you want breadcrumbs tracking, there's other great providers out there for that. But the way that trucks flow through the United States is, even though they might have different origins and destinations, at some point they're likely going to hop on the middle mile in a way that, if they're running up I-24 here between Chattanooga and Nashville, then they might splinter out there. On that I-24 stretch is a great example where it's a choke point that we can go ahead and capture trucks there and then capture where they are next. And so we might get 2 or more data points on the way, but over time you understand where those lanes are for the carriers without needing to put sensors on every single possible lane out there.
So are you actually tracking each, from origin destination of every single truckload, or is it just pattern recognition of a truck that happens to be passing these corridors?
Going back to my counterterrorism background at CIA, it wasn't just about any one source of data. So even though I was a human intelligence officer and I was recruiting sources, we would be then checking that data against satellites and the other types of sources of data. We're taking that same approach here at Genlogs and fusing together what we're seeing on the middle mile with other data sets that actually does enable us, and not with every truck on the road, with many trucks on the roads, go back and understand their origins, destinations, and their patterns. It also allows us to see, even within one carrier, is it one truck seen 10 times or 10 trucks seen one time on a lane, to understand whether it's a carrier's power lane or not. So there's inferences that we're able to get from this data, and that's what we aggregate together and then present in a really easy format to our customers.
What's the use cases? I mean, if you, help me understand the use cases for this type of data.
Sure, so I'll give you, we just rolled out a real-time API recently, which truly allows a broker that has maybe a large carrier network they're working with. Traditionally you'd have a carrier sales team that's picking up the phones a few hours every morning, trying to call their list of carriers to say, where are your trucks? What type of equipment do you have? What backhaul needs do you need? All of that, and then potentially manually updating that in spreadsheets or TMS. With our APIs now, we allow these same carrier sales reps to just search an OD pairing, and we will tell them all of the carriers that are within their network that are within a 2-hour drive of that origin right now for a spot load, for example, and that has the right equipment that matches that, whether it's a reefer, it could be a 13-axle RGN, whatever it might be, we're seeing that with our camera technology. And then being able to say, based on past data patterns, they likely need a backhaul to that destination. Now, we may not be right, and we certainly will not be 100% of the time. But on the aggregate, we're going to be able to make better recommendations to get to the carrier that will say yes, rather than kind of doing the shotgun spray and pray of, I'm just going to call a lot of people and hope to figure out which carriers in my network that are at the right place, right time.
But you're not actually tracking the individual truck at every single moment.
We are not.
So you don't actually know if a truck is in that location. What you're looking at is consistent pattern, and we'll call it liquidity on a lane, where a carrier is running the same lane on a consistent basis.
You know, yes, that's the base for sure. But because we do correlate other data sets to the trucks that we're seeing on the roads, we can actually understand that the past patterns have been that a carrier based in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, when they head towards Chicago, they end up dropping in Chicago, and they don't really go west of Chicago. So we might not see in real time exactly every minute where that carrier is, but when we do catch them on the interstate headed into the larger Chicago market, we have an understanding that they have a very high likelihood of dropping there, and a very high likelihood of not having an exact backhaul back, because we've seen that same carrier in the data scrambling to maybe Detroit to take a load, or down to Gary, Indiana to take a load. We'll see some difference occurring in the data that allows us to say this is a high likelihood of a carrier that is looking for a backhaul to Harrisburg. Now again, we're still developing this technology and building it out. I will say one way that this technology has been very successful has been on finding stolen or misused or rogue assets on the roads. And that's something that's an initial use case that we started a year ago, starting to prove out. And over the last 4 months, we've been able to help recover over 400 stolen or misused assets on the roads for either whether it's brokers or our carrier customers as well. And that's been a use case we've been leaning into a lot. But FreightWaves actually broke the story yesterday. We announced yesterday that we are going to be doing that now for the entire industry for free. That it's actually a really low lift for us to put an asset that has been reported missing into our system, to track it down historically, wherever it's been seen, but more importantly, place an alert there that if it's seen in the future, we will get a real-time indication where it is, who's pulling it, and then help work with that, whether it's broker, carrier, shipper, and local law enforcement to try to recover that. So that's something that now that this network has been developed, and we're continuing to put out more and more of these sensors, but it's a way that we can certainly help the industry given the rise of fraud and theft that we've seen in recent years.
So it strikes me that's a very powerful use case. I think, obviously we've talked a lot over the last couple of days about freight fraud. The idea that this industry is incredibly exposed, and just exponentially more so than ever, of having trucks and trailers stolen. A lot of it is white collar, sort of organized crime overseas. It's actually something I'm sure you appreciate. What has been the reaction, or how do companies take the step if they happen to see their trucks or trailers passing one of your camera systems?
Yeah, I think before, let's say a trailer example. In the past, a trailer would go missing from a lot, potentially unsecured lot, or at a truck stop. And you'd report that trailer, but the law enforcement couldn't do much beyond that. I don't even know where they would put that in their system. It would go in a log somewhere of it was reported missing, but there was no teeth to the next step, that investigative step. Now, we can pull images. I mean, each one of our sensors is capturing from the front, side, and rear of every passing truck and piece of equipment. So it does allow us right away to show, hey, we just found the trailer, and it was connected to this MC. And this MC, now in some instances, we've had it where it's an absolute, it was a legitimate carrier and they took the wrong trailer. And when that happens, at least there's a way to track that down and there's no harm, no foul. It was truly a mistake. But when there's actually malintent, or in a worst case, white collar crime, or truly a criminal syndicate, we now have evidence that which truck was pulling that trailer. And now law enforcement can actually do something with that data. They can see where else that truck, where it's domiciled, who's registered with it. It just hasn't, that investigative tool hasn't previously existed the way it does now.
Something we've been talking about, and I hope that you can solve this, because I think the bigger issue is not proving or showing someone using it, but getting the authorities to care.
Yeah.
one of the conversation that's happened a lot, and this is really over the last 20 years, is a war on terror, something that you participated in, has taken so many government resources away from the FBI and the authorities that are supposed to investigate these crimes, that they aren't doing that. They don't seem to care. And I've had my own experiences with that, where we had a driver who stole, when plasma screen monitors are $20,000 a piece, we had a dock worker who actually had them on camera in the freaking facility, work for us. And we submitted it to the local police department, and the police did nothing. And that's the bigger problem. Like, I love the fact that you're identifying where these assets are, who's using them. But the bigger question to me is, how do we get the authorities, something maybe you can talk about from your own experience, how do we get the authorities to care about this problem?
Yeah, my experience has been that there are certain pockets of law enforcement that really do care. I know that Los Angeles Sheriff's Department has their own cargo theft team that they've formed. And they really do want to get to the bottom of this. Obviously, we see a lot of the issues in cargo theft happening down in Southern California. I just think it comes down to, with a lack of tools, you can only do so much. But once those tools are at your fingertips, and the cost to actually solve this case and actually go out and make an arrest that they can publicize that, like, hey, we took down a syndicate. And just the other day, I was communicating with law enforcement in the LA cargo theft, because we had reported, there was a reported stolen trailer that when we looked in our data, we saw it connected to one carrier. But then the next day, we got a ping that now it was connected to a different carrier. And I was thinking, what's going on here? They just, potentially it was dropped, someone else picked it up. Maybe it was being shared, but they didn't know what was happening. But I looked, and both of the carriers were domiciled within about 20 minutes of each other in Los Angeles. They also both had almost synchronous license plates that were issued almost like days after each other. And then it turns out that in the past, they were both sharing the same phone number. And so it turns out that we were seeing like a network now starting to form. And then sure enough, 2 weeks later, another carrier is connected to this. And it just looked like we were seeing the markings of a network that was maybe taking unauthorized use or stealing these trailers and using them. We were able to deliver that to law enforcement, and they did take action in this case. Beforehand, they had no recourse. And so I agree with you, Craig. I think law enforcement needs to do more. I think that a lot of the issues we're seeing in the industry are falling on deaf ears. Genlogs is trying to do our part by bringing the tools that can be done. And we're not going out and charging law enforcement for the data, for the use of this. I mean, we're not only investigating it for the owner-operator whose whole livelihood's on the line with this one trailer that was stolen. We're going to help investigate that and get it back to them for free, but we're also going to give that data to law enforcement so that they can actually make that investigation, bring those culprits to justice, and have that done for free. When the data and the tools are at your disposal and a department doesn't need to pay for them, I do think we'll start to see more done about it.
Ryan, the core use case of Genlogs, you guys are in a stage where you have the solution set, you figured out what the business will look like in terms of a product. The question that I have, and I've had this question come up on a number of times, is how can I use it? It strikes me in the spot market to be far more challenging to use Genlogs for spot market opportunities because of the inconsistent nature of that, since you're not tracking each truck at each location. But it sort of struck me that in the contract market, where I have a situation where I have a carrier that's running the same lane that perhaps I'm trying to solve a problem for, it seems like that is a much bigger opportunity for a broker to take advantage of than a spot market where the freight, trucks are moving all over. The nomadic nature of a spot market is such that it makes it much more challenging.
Yeah, I don't disagree fully here at this time in terms of where we are. I think where brokers started to use Genlog's platform was really looking at dedicated lanes and searching for carriers there. And I think early on we had a lot of success because of the data we were collecting, that we had one broker that had been searching for 3 months for a carrier on a lane and was just striking up empty. And when he used the Genlogs platform, within the first 3 minutes, he found a great carrier. Well, that carrier was domiciled 1,000 miles away. It would never have been evident to look for that carrier on that lane. And that's the success that people are having all the time. I would say there's more we want to do when it comes to providing carrier recommendations in the spot market. I think that goes to the real-time API there. But just from like the low table stakes for at least Genlogs to help out, there are a lot of brokers that are saying, hey, we want to be off load boards by the end of 2025. And they're actually coming to Genlogs to try to help them get there. And we'll do what we can. But at least right now, when they are still posting spot loads on the load boards, it is a really, you get the warm and fuzzy when you are connected with the carrier off the load board, but you can put that carrier's MC right in our platform and visually see the evidence that that carrier is running that lane, or at least has in the past. That A, they have assets. They're actually out there in the roads, and they aren't in Eastern Europe double brokering with no assets. Like this is a real carrier running the lanes with the right equipment and in the right area. And that at least gives brokers the ability to move forward with more confidence than they maybe ever have been able to before.
How would you said they could move off the load board. I'm struggling with to understand how Genlogs would help somebody do that.
I think once we get with enough sensor density, we truly are going to be able to look at the patterns of carriers and help find carriers in real time that are entering certain markets that likely will be, at least you can reach out to them. And if we can help you get from the spray and pray approach of posting and having to take the inbound to now going really smartly outbound like a sniper rifle, it remains. It's an open question. I think we're going to get there. I think we've seen some early success, though, where we do have strong sensor density in certain areas, that we have brokers that are truly finding carriers that before they post to a load board, they're just checking Genlogs to say, what does Genlog say about which carriers are entering this market right now that have, especially in the niche equipment types, like if you're looking at either car haulers or potentially with a certain type of RGN, to be able to know that a carrier is in that market right now with that equipment, and based on the past data that we've observed, likely are going to be headed towards the destination, at least making a call, especially if it's in your carrier network, you might hit there that like, hey, they actually are looking for a backhaul. So again, remains to be seen there. I think we're gonna be working that over this next year.
Yeah, I mean the ELD device companies, the visibility companies have data on where trucks are at on a real-time basis based on sensors. The reason they've never been able to action that data from a marketplace standpoint is you don't know the context of what that truck is doing. I think it would strike me as you probably have the same problem. So moving freight off the load board, I think would be incredibly challenging, particularly for the spot market. At least that's my read on it. How do you respond to that?
I would say let's check in a year.
Okay.
Let's see how we're
got some plans to
sure do.
Disintermediate.
Yeah.
Like I think everybody's all for disintermediating the load boards.
Yes.
I have been a proponent of doing that. Would love to see how you guys actually execute that. I think the bigger opportunity, or the one that I think is also a major problem, is the idea of mitigating fraud that is propagated on load boards. Because that is a primary source of where fraud is actually taking place.
Absolutely. And there's so much we can do and that we are doing in that space, working with great partnerships in the industry as well, where our data can be brought to bear with other data that other providers and vetting tools and onboarding tools and all of that bringing that all together, I think there's truly a world in which fraud becomes almost impossible when you have enough data vectors coming in to say like, hey, this carrier's legitimate, they have the assets, they're in the way, or they're on the way, all of that, and then to actually verify at the gates, hey, is this the carrier that we brokered that load to that's actually pulling up to the shipper's gates? If you bring all of that together, I think we can get to a place in the industry where it becomes really difficult to perpetrate fraud. And in as much as you try to get creative, or fraudsters will certainly try to get creative, multi-factor data and taking an all-source intelligence approach like I did in the intelligence community and my team does every day, I think that's what's going to win the day.
Well, it strikes me as a big opportunity for Genlogs, and I wish you the best of luck.
Thanks so much,
Thank
Greg.
you.
Absolutely.